friends. My name is Marley Bird, and this is video 1 of the My First Summer Vest Knit Along. I am thrilled to be joining you once again here in the spring, teaching you how to make something new, fun, and fabulous. I designed this knit summer vest to be beginner friendly with a couple of extra little tidbits for those of you who are experienced knitters. We will cast on right down here at the bottom of the vest and work our way up the entire pattern to the very top. This top portion right here is the only seaming we will do for the entire pattern because the vest is all made in one piece without seams, which means by the end of June, you will have a vest completed that you will be proud of. I've divided this pattern up into 4 sections. These sections are completely manageable, but they do require you to have some homework between each of the video releases. There's something new for everybody to learn, and I hope you will have a good time along with me. For a full list of the materials, how to choose a size, and for that free pattern, click on the link in the video description box right down there below. Now that we've gone over the basics, let's go ahead and dive into the materials. As I mentioned, part of the beauty of this vest are the color changes, and these color changes are achieved by the yarn I used for this project. I held together 2 strands of yarn, one strand of It's a Wrap Rainbow and one strand of It's a Wrap Sprinkles. Now, I pulled my strands from the inside, but I know that right now there is a large discussion in the Knit Along group on Facebook about whether we should all pull from the inside, pull one from the inside and one from the outside, or vice versa, or pull both from the outside. Really, it's completely up to you. To me, I wouldn't overthink it. I would just be consistent along the way so that way you can transition from one set of yarn to the next set of yarn when it's time to add new balls of yarn. Now, this yarn is constructed a little bit differently than your basic Red Heart Super Saver in that they are constructed of 4 strands of yarn, and they are not really twisted at all. I wouldn't even call them lightly twisted. They are barely even twisted. So as you're holding the yarn together, it will be very important that you keep the yarn together and don't let one strand go kind of haywire and get crazy, or make sure that as you're knitting, you don't accidentally leave one strand behind or only pick up one strand. You need to maintain constant tension and a really good grasp of where the yarn is. The best way I found to do this is to always be consistent with how your yarn is in front of you, whether it's on your table, in front of you, in your chair, or whatever it is. Keep it always so like one color is over here and one color is over here. Don't have it this way one time and then switch it around to this way another time and then maybe like this another time. Like keep them in the same place. I do this by using my Erin Lane bag, which is called a twofer. Now this bag, it's a very simple bag and it has a drawstring, but on the inside, can you see this divider here? The divider keeps the yarn separated on each side and it keeps it in place. So it doesn't get shifted around at all. It's always in the same place, and I can easily pull the yarn from the inside or the outside, whichever I choose. Yarn management for this project is something you need to pay attention to. So whether you get yourself an Erin Lane bag, or maybe you have 2 bags that you have in the house that you can put together side by side, or use 2 Ziploc bags, whatever works for you, I highly recommend you do put your yarn in some sort of a container to keep it all together, so that way you don't have any sort of a mishap. Having said that, there have been some questions about whether we should rewind this yarn and wind it together into one big ball. I am going to say don't do that because it's very possible to accidentally get halfway through the ball and have one strand of yarn a little bit longer than the others just because of the way the yarn is. So it's better to keep them as 2 separate balls and then work them in that manner. Okay, so that's the yarn. We're going to work together with this yarn. It's a lot of fun to work with. And as I mentioned, the color changes along the way are done automatically because of the yarn. And when it's time to add 2 new balls of yarn, we'll talk about that then, because there is a plan for that as well. Once you have the yarn, you also need to make sure you have a good set of needles that are long enough to accommodate the number of stitches you are going to be using for this project. This vest is made from the bottom all the way up, and it's made in one piece, which means the full circumference of the body needs to be able to fit on your set of needles. So make sure you have some needles that are long enough to accommodate all of these stitches. For video 1, along with the yarn and the needles, you will need 2 stitch markers and a cable needle or double pointed needle to work those wrap stitches. Okay, now that we have the materials, we've talked about the yarn, let's dive into the actual pattern. The first part of this pattern begins with garter stitch, and for garter stitch, I always like to use a long tail cast on. The trouble here is that there are a lot of stitches we need to cast on, and a lot of us have a fear of running out of yarn. So here is a tip. Take the full circumference of the vest you are making, and then take your yarn and make your tail 3 times that circumference. So obviously this is not a full circumference, but you get the idea. I did 3 times the circumference. And then give yourself a little added yarn right here just to make sure you have enough. At this point, I want you to do your slip knot, and then you can continue on with your long tail cast on. So the long tail cast on, you will have your tail around your thumb, your working yarn around your forefinger, create your slingshot, and then create your long tail cast on. You want to cast on the total number of stitches listed for the size you are making. So make sure you have taken a second to highlight all of the numbers that pertain to the size you are making. Okay, there are a lot of stitches here to cast on, but I know that you can do this, okay? It's a very simple long tail cast on. Nothing too tricky about this, okay? Once you get those stitches cast on, you can then begin row 1. Now I'm going to get you started on row 1 right here with these stitches that I cast on so you can see how to work into those 8 strands of yarn there, okay? Now row 1 begins with a purl 2, so we would bring our yarn to the front, and then I want to give you a tip. I like to bring my yarn from the left-hand needle sort of down to the tip, the tapered edge of my needle, and that makes it easier for me to get my right-hand needle into all of those strands without leaving one behind. Now I can purl 1, and I will purl the second one. Bring my yarn to the back, and once again, you can see I'm bringing the yarn down to the tapered edge, and I will knit 1, and I will knit a second one, okay? So this purl 2, knit 2, I would do that 5 times and then add a marker. Pretty simple stuff. You can follow the instructions and see exactly how to do this row 1. More importantly, in the video, I wanted you to see how to work into those strands. You have to be very vigilant that you get all of the strands as you're knitting or purling with them. The last thing you want to do is come through and then accidentally go like that. Can you see how I have one strand there that's not picked up? If I do that and I come off, see how that strand, it comes over there and it just doesn't look very good? So we want to make sure that that is something we don't do. So as you unknit it, you also need to make sure that you get that strand back on the needle so that way you can go back and knit it, okay? Pretty simple stuff. I know a lot of you are probably thinking to yourself, whoa, this is going to be tricky. It is a little bit tricky to start, but I promise you, once you get going along and you kind of get a rhythm with the yarn, it becomes easier, okay? Once you have all of your repeat complete, then you would continue on and you would just knit essentially to the last 20 stitches where you would again do the knit 2, purl 2 ribbing pattern, and you would finish off that row. So you will begin every row and end every row with 2 by 2 ribbing. That's because the first 20 stitches and the last 20 stitches of this pattern are the 2 by 2 ribbed collar. Pretty simple stuff, right? So whenever you have those first 20 stitches or the last 20 stitches, you will always be working in that ribbed pattern. By the end of the border, you will have 4 garter stitch ridges at the bottom of your vest, and the sides of your vest will be in this 2 by 2 ribbing, just like I mentioned. Once you've completed the border, you then jump into the body of the vest and you will work stockinette stitch between the markers that you have in place. So on this little swatch here, I have worked the border and I have worked up through row 8 of the body of the vest, and I'm getting ready to start row 9. Now I am going to assume that all of you who are watching this video know how to do stockinette. That's where you knit the stitches on the right side and you purl the stitches on the wrong side. If you have any hesitation, simply look at the pattern and follow along with the row by row instructions, and you will see that whenever you're on the right side, you will knit the stitches between the markers, and when you're on the wrong side, you will purl the stitches between the markers. On row 9, that's where we introduce this 5 wrap stitch, okay? So let's go ahead, and I am using a worsted weight yarn for this just to make it easy for you to see how these stitches are made. I thought it would be easier to see it on a basic worsted weight yarn. So you can see here, I'm working through these rib stitches and I'm just knitting my knits and purling my purls. So I really don't even have to think too much about whether I'm knitting or purling, because I am just, if I'm looking at a knit, I knit it. If I'm looking at a purl, I purl it. When I get to my marker, I slip my marker, and this is where I will begin my wrap stitches. Okay, you guys ready? So we will knit 1 stitch. Okay, that 1 stitch does not count as part of my repeat. My repeat is this. We will knit 3. And now we have to do a 5 wrap. So what I will do, I am going to grab this small cable needle. You can use a double pointed needle. You can use a different type of cable needle, whatever works to get this job done. Okay, let me show you how this works. I will take these next 5 stitches from the left-hand needle, okay, and they're on my cable needle. My yarn is to the back. I want to make sure that my right-hand needle is nice and close to that stitch. And I will take this yarn and I will wrap it from the back, go around, and back to the front. Now here's something. You have to decide how tight you want these stitches together, okay? So for me, I don't want them all spaced out like they normally would be if they were just in basic stockinette. I like them a little bit pulled together, but not like that. I like them about like that, okay? You will find what works best for you, and you will wrap around those stitches 3 times. We have 3 wraps in the front. You will finish in the back. And then here's how I do this. I take these stitches and I take the wraps and I kind of pull the wraps down a little bit, and I give this cable a little pull, and then I take my cable needle out. I know that some of you just freaked out. I take my right hand needle and I put those stitches on my right hand needle. Now if you don't want to take your cable needle out and just transfer them on, you can do that as well. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Once those are over here on the right hand needle, you are correct, they have not been worked, but I don't want them to be worked, okay? So it's like we slipped them over, but we also wrapped yarn around them. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to finish my repeat, which happens to be knit 4. Okay? So this right there, that is my repeat for my wraps row. Can you see that? Okay, let's do this again. So we start the repeat. We knit 3, 1, 2, 3. We do our wrap. So we slip 5 to our cable needle. I make sure my right hand needle is nice and close to that stitch. I found that it just made it nice. And then going from the back, I wrap once. Establish how tight you want those stitches together on that first wrap. And then there's 2. And then there's 3. So I finished in the back. This is where normally for me, I grab those wraps and I pull them down and kind of give myself a shake. And then I take the cable needle off. But if you want to slip them off one by one from the cable needle, you could do that. Just like so. And then you would knit 4. Okay. Now, I'm not going to lie, this row does take some time and it takes a little bit of patience, but once it's all done, it looks so cool. Let's do it again. So we have to knit 3, slip our 5, and make sure I just keep everything in the same place. One, 2, 3, come to the back. Kind of pinch those and hold them down. And then you can take them off individually if you want, just like this. So they're now over here on the right hand needle. And then you notice like I put my thumb on all of that to hold it in place. And then I continue on with my knit 4. See that? All right, so I have one more repeat before I get to the end of this row. So let's do it one more time here. So I knit 3, slip 5, wrap 3 times. So 1, make sure you establish how tight you want them on there on the first one here. There's 3 wraps. This one, give it a pull. I'm going to put those on there. Haha! And then I will knit 4. That brings me to my marker. I slip my marker, and again, I just keep these in this 2x2 ribbing the whole way. So if I'm looking at purls, I purl them. If I'm looking at knits, I knit them. Okay? And there you have it. So that would be the end of row 9, and you can see all of my wrap stitches right there, and it's called a 5- wrap because we have 5 stitches. Now, something I do want to point out is because I'm using a worsted weight yarn, I can very easily see where those 5 stitches are on my needle, right? Like I can see that I've wrapped them, but they aren't super tight, and I'll easily be able to get into each one of those stitches on the next row. But as I'm working with the It's a Wrap yarn, you can easily get those stitches way too tight, and it's nearly impossible to get into them on the next row. So when you're doing your wrap stitches, really be conscientious of that. Make sure you're not wrapping them too tight so you can't get into them on the next row. And at the same time, you don't want to be too loose or it becomes a little bit sloppy. Let me show you how I know this. On my sample that I'm making as I work along with you, you can see right down here on the first row that I did my wraps. I did them nice and snug. I was like, yes, that's what I want them to look like. And on the following row, it was nearly impossible to get into those stitches. So you can see on the next row, the next time I did wraps, I loosened them up a little bit, right? And I was like, all right, that looks really good. And they were easy to get into. The fabric laid nice. I'm like, yes, those are the ones I want. But because all of this took so much time, I was like, I am not going to rip this out. I'm going to go along with it, no problem. But as I continued knitting and the night went on, I did start to get a little bit too relaxed with my wraps. So these ones up here are a little bit too relaxed. Look, I can even get my finger underneath all of those. So those are just too relaxed. These ones here are perfect. These ones here are perfect. And these ones here are too tight. So you are going to have to find your happy placement. Hopefully it's with these ones and you won't have ones that are too tight and ones that are too loose, but you can work with it. You'll also notice that all of the crossovers happen back here in the back. So as we do our wraps, you always start in the back on the wrong side and then begin to wrap. And so it makes all of the wrap stitches look really nice from the right side. Let's go ahead and work into those stitches that I just wrapped so you can see what I mean as far as working into the wrap stitches. I've worked across the ribbing and I have slipped my marker. So now I'm going to go ahead and get to where my wraps are. And you'll notice on row 10, it just says to purl between your markers. And that's really all you're going to do. When you get to your wrap stitches, you're going to treat each one of those 5 stitches as an individual stitch. So I will go into each one and make sure that I knit each one individually. As you're working with the It's a Wrap yarn, you want to take your time with this part to make sure you don't accidentally leave one of the strands behind or grab a strand from the other stitch. Okay, so you just take your time and work into all of these stitches. So really, we're just back to stockinette. We're just purling on our wrong side, knitting on our right side until we get down to row 18, where we will do those wrap stitches once again. Only on row 18, our wrap stitches are made as we're looking at the wrong side of our fabric. So far, so good, right? I told you it's pretty easy. We keep those ribbing stitches. We mainly work in stockinette through the whole piece, and we throw in those fun wrap stitches, which coincidentally, I added in there because we're using It's a Wrap yarn, and I thought it was kind of a funny pun. So now you know the story behind the wrap stitches. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at a row 18 and how you do the wrap stitches on row 18. Once again, I've changed yarns just to give you a different look. I've completed the 2x2 ribbing. Here's my marker and I'm getting ready to start my row 18. Row 18 begins with a purl 6, and this purl 6 does not count as the repeat. So we just purl 6 here at the beginning. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now we have our repeat. We start off with purl 4. And now we are going to do our wrap stitch. So my yarn is going to be in front here. Okay, so I have it on the wrong side. I'm going to take this cable needle this time just to show you a different cable needle. And I will slip 5 stitches. Same process. I have the stitches butt right up to my right hand needle just like before. My yarn is on the wrong side. It's facing me this time. And I'm going to go in front of the stitches like so and wrap them around the needle. So that's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. Okay? Go ahead, give my needle a good pull as I'm holding the wraps down, just because it's easy for me to do that. And I can just pop those directly onto my right hand needle. And I carry on with a purl 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And that's my repeat. See how my crossovers are on the back side? It looks just like plain wraps on the front side, and it's pretty easy stuff. So even though we're on the wrong side, the process is basically the same. Let's see, let's do this again. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Make sure our yarn is on the wrong side. Grab our cable needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 onto the cable needle. This time I'm bringing my yarn in front of those stitches because I want the crossover on the back side, right? On this wrong side. So I'm in front of them. So there's 1, 2, and 3. I pinch those wraps. I can transfer them directly from this cable needle just like I did the other. I could do one at a time. So 1, 2, 3, 4. See, it's just easier for me to just take them off. See, 4 and 5. There we go. They're all right there. I continue on with the repeat, which means I have to purl 3. So make sure everything's all wrapped still. And I purl 3. So 1, 2, and 3. Got that? You now know all of the stitches you need to know to complete your homework for week 1. Simply repeat rows 1 through 18 until the body of your vest measures about 8 inches. Or you know what? Why don't you repeat rows 1 through 18 2 more times? That'll put you at the perfect spot for next week's video. I know you can do this vest pattern without any trouble. Be patient with yourself. It will take a little bit of time to get used to holding the 2 strands of yarn together. Use my tip about the yarn management and have fun. If you have questions, don't hesitate to ask us in the Marley Bird Facebook group. I have put a link in the video description box right down there below. We would love to see you there and love to see your work in progress. I am so excited for all of you to get started with this great knit along. Good luck. I'll see you next week.